Whether as a politician or as the head of Civic Action, the single most frustrating part of all of those experiences for me has been the unwillingness of people in public life to level with you, whether you're taxpayers, voters, citizens, you as people. It's not that they're all lying. A minority actually do that. A minority lie, but just a minority. But I would argue a majority don't and won't tell the whole truth, the real truth, and nothing but the truth. And so it has been with transportation and transit. How do you pay for those road improvements and that transit? Let me deal with a couple of the answers offered up by those who are either not being honest with you or who don't understand finances very well. There are those who say, pay for it out of savings on government waste. I want to be clear. You know how I feel about this. There is still massive waste in all of the governments. Most of it, I believe, in the form of middle level. And by the way, don't be comforted by that description, because middle level in government terms mean people making $100,000 in compensation and benefits and so on. But I believe there are literally thousands of middle level people in all of these governments who don't actually deliver any government services themselves. They design them, and they debate them, and they analyze them, and they compare them, and they study them, and they talk about them, and they go to conferences about them, but they don't actually deliver any government services. Nobody in government ever really does what we desperately need, which is to weed a lot of those people out. Their overhead, they don't add value, they don't deliver a service. And if we did that, it won't produce a lot of money to put into transit, because then we might just be able, maybe, to balance the budget. There will not be $2 billion extra left over for transit if we did that. So the same people might then say, okay, if you don't like that argument, let's use private money. You all know that using private money is a real and viable option, but private money either means you give something up, the person with the money owns the transportation link, like the 407, for example. That'll be enough to scare a lot of you who will say, oh, don't go down that road. Well, either if they give you private money, you let them own the asset and run it and charge the fares they want for it, or you pay the private money back over time, plus interest, just like your mortgage. And that raises the question of where do you get the money to pay it back? And nobody, least of all the people quite logically arguing in favor of the use of private money, nobody has been honest in telling you that it has to be paid back and telling you how it will be paid back and by whom. Here's what Rob Ford had to say on the matter of constructing his beloved subways.
And if there isn't any money, then you know what? Then we don't build subways. It's very simple. And whatever money's available, I'm going to put it underground, and that's it. It's very straightforward, and that's what I've been elected to do, and I'm going to deliver on what I said.
He said right there, if there isn't any money, then we won't build the subways. So he's being honest about that. Even Rob Ford, with all of his much vaunted talk about gravy trains, you would still have maybe a balanced budget, maybe. So there isn't the $2 billion extra for transit. That money has to be raised in a separate way and kept aside just for transit, so we can be sure each and every year that you can keep building. Every year, like they do in pretty well every country. They build some every year. They don't stop and start based on whether the money's available. We can't stop making these investments. I think this tax or charge or whatever it is we do should be regional, so you can have a regional solution. Because quite frankly, if you live around the 416, meaning in the city of Toronto, in large parts of the city, the traffic and the transit are okay. If you live downtown, I mean, you can walk to the subway or get on a streetcar pretty well anywhere. The terrible traffic jams that a lot of you are sitting in now and that happen 7 days a week, including weekends and including times that are non-rush hour, are places like Highway 7 and Yonge Street north of Steeles and out in the east, in Ajax and Pickering and so on. And that is why we need to have a regional solution that improves both the roads and the transit. And I argue you will not find in adequate time to get started on this the money from eliminating government waste, besides which I would argue that money's needed just to balance the budget. So you need to come up with a separate fund for transit and roads, and that's what we're talking about here, and that's what Kathleen Wynne is being honest about. You see, other people will pretend to you that this is not so, or that private money can be used. Well, private money can be used, except there's just one small wrinkle. It's just like your mortgage. You gotta pay it back plus interest. So it raises then the ugly question of how do you pay it back? I can be honest with you here. I have no dog in this fight. I'm not running for anything. I'm just sitting here being honest with you, which a lot of other people won't be because they're afraid to be. The plan I'm talking about, that Kathleen Wynne is talking about funding, is a plan that has been agreed to by everybody. It's called the Big Move. It costs $50 billion. They've accounted for 18 of the $50 billion. So there's $32 billion left over 25 years or some period of time like that has to be accounted for by this revenue tool we're talking about. That's the truth that nobody wants to share with you. There is a plan. It's regional. It covers GO trains and all kinds of things that'll make life better for a lot of people, but it isn't funded except to the extent of $18 out of $50 billion. That is why I'm suggesting this money, raised through whatever means, be put into a separate fund under independent trustees overseen by a respected auditing firm that can say to you every penny that went in, every penny that went out, and that the government can't touch it for anything else. They can't use it for boondoggles or to pay civil servants or to finance power plant moving. It's all for transit. And I believe you put me in charge of that, and I guarantee you not one penny will leak out, and including on ridiculous expense accounts and stuff like that. If the people who want to stand up and say no charges, no levies, no taxes, no fees ever want to say that, no problem. But then they've got to stand up and say the rest of it, which is no transit. There is no free transit, and there isn't a lot of money sitting around anywhere. There's a lot of waste in government. God knows I would have given my eye teeth to be the mayor of Toronto because I had such a clear idea in mind from having run a business, I think, of where you could take out people who just don't add value. And it's not against those people. They're not bad people. They're just not adding any value to your government and to the delivery of services to you. Because, as I said, they're debating and studying and analyzing and polling and reporting on and going to conferences about and having meetings and breathing each other's exhaust about government services, but not delivering any. And that's where the fat is in the government. And there is billions of it because, think about it. Every one of these people making 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000, plus their pension, plus their benefits, plus an office space, plus maybe an assistant, plus a phone, plus a computer. You know how it goes. You know this. And nobody's tackling this. Ask yourself if you've heard anybody tackling that. No, they're not. There are buildings full of people doing that. And so anybody that wants to say no fees, no charges, no problem, but just do the rest of it. Be honest. Step up and say no transit. Stay in those traffic jams. Forget about it. We're just not doing it. And I'd say that's not the right approach. I think it's the short-sighted approach that looks 2 minutes down the road and doesn't look down the road 2 decades to the kind of city our kids are going to inherit. There's going to otherwise we're going to be strangled. But we got to suck it up, have the discussion, be honest about it, and then make some decisions. And we don't get to make those decisions. The politicians do, but they need our help.